Test, test, test. This is just a quick test to see if everything's going okay. Okay. Hey everybody. It's Dwayne here, and I'm just doing a quick Marvel Multiverse RPG stream. This is just for me to test out my new format. I am hoping to do a little bit more of these, as I always hope to do. But I'm going to start focusing on the Marvel Multiverse RPG. It's a brand new role-playing game, and I thought I'd spend some time just giving my ideas to the community and maybe chronicling my journey with the game as well. I currently own the Roll20 digital version of the game. I haven't picked up the hardcover book yet. There's a very specific reason, as I anticipate most of my play on this game is going to be online as opposed to people around the table. So I wanted to have that resource available to me. What you're seeing here down below is actually the Roll20, a brand new Roll20 page that I've created just for this stream. So essentially, I'm going to walk you through how I envision setting up the Roll20 Marvel Multiverse pages. There's been a lot of talk about how to bring this particular game to life on your table. And I've got a particular idea on how I want to roleplay with this game, and we'll see how it collides with the rules. So first things first, I'm going to take you in and show you a blank page. Now, with the digital compendium, one of the cool things about it is that you can just drag and drop stuff right from the compendium itself. So I'm going to show you me doing that. I'm going to go in and I'm going to bring a character into the compendium and show you what that looks like. And I'm just going to bring in a character randomly, well, not randomly, premeditated. I know who I'm bringing in. So let's bring in my boy, Nick Fury. And I'll enlarge that token. Now, one of my complaints about the compendium is that I can't just click on Nick Fury and get his stats. I have to drag him onto the table. So I'm going to put him right there. I'm going to show you how you can do this. So that's Nick Fury. You're going to want to hold down Shift and double click on that token just to get a good look at his stats. But for this video here, I'm not really concerned about Nick Fury's stats, but that's how you would open up his character sheet. Now, the one thing that I'm going to draw your attention to is the fact that this white page is white for a reason. There's no battle grid on it. I've set grid to off, and the reason why I'm doing that is we're going to create a living comic book page for your players. And what I mean by that is that we're going to play a theater of the mind role-playing experience with your players, but we're going to infuse it with good old-fashioned Marvel sensibilities. So point in case, we have Nick Fury. Now what should we do with this at this point? And this is, just all up to you to decide, but I'm going to add in a dialogue box. And I'm a big fan of using this format for superhero type RPGs that I do online. And I actually even do it for other RPGs, but I'm going to show you here. So we're going to add in a dialogue box, very simple. I'm going to go and do a shape, and I'm going to set that shape to black border, of course, and I'm going to change that to large. And I'm just going to draw it right here. And I'm going to make sure that I go back to my selection tool, and I'm going to set Nick Fury to be at the front. There we go. So voila, I've just created a text box, very comic book looking text box, and I have some other surprises for you in a second here, but for now this is the text box we're going to use. And we're going to put some dialogue in there to start off the role play. Let's just say you have a group of characters around, they've got some pre-generated or they've got some created ones of their own, and let's just say Nick Fury is their protagonist and he's going to give them a mission. Rather than role play that, I mean, granted you could role play that, but rather than just simply verbalize that to your players and do your best impression of Nick Fury, Samuel L. Jackson, then you could do a non-verbal role play style technique. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to add some text. Before I do that, though, I'm going to set the size a little bit bigger because the default size is fairly slow. I am going to leave it as black, but I'm going to change the font. I don't know all these fonts very well. There is no Comic Sans in Roll20, which is what I would prefer to use. So for now, I'm just going to use, let's just use Arial because I really don't know what Contrail. I don't know what the other ones look like. We're going to put our text box right there, and we're going to say, okay, heroes, it's time for action. I need your help. And we'll put that one down below. And we'll go back to our selection tool, and we're going to move that into a spot right there. So My view on role-playing with this system is very much creating a living comic book. You know, the role play can all be done, theater of the mind, verbal, whatever you want to do. But even if you are doing verbal role play, it's nice to have your players sort of get involved in this process. And here's how you would do it. So say they're playing a pre-gen or their own character for that matter. Let's just see in my library here if I've got some characters that I've made. I have actually made some fun ones. So let's just go and grab, I made this guy here, modeled him after one of my favorite characters in the Wildstorm universe. Here we go. So this is a character that I modeled after Spartan in the Wildstorm universe, created by Jim Lee, one of my favorite comic book artists of all time. And this is not a pre-gen, but let's just say a player has created his own character. And he wants to get involved in this idea of a living comic book, and he has some ideas for some non-verbal roleplay. Keeping in mind this page is long. Well, not too long, but this doesn't replace your moment-to-moment roleplay or action or whatever. This is just meant to supplement your roleplay in this particular game. So let's just say one of your players is controlling this guy called Vanguard, and he wants to throw in sort of some non-verbal stuff to go with it. You could, if you wanted to, do what I just did and just put in another text box there. But if you look at the golden age of comics, they started using different colors and stuff to spice up their text boxes and that. And I've actually gone ahead and I've gone and created some of these text boxes. So I'm going to go and put a red one in. Ahead of time, I've gone into Photoshop and I've actually gone and created a red block. So I'm going to put that here, and maybe a sense of urgency. So here we go. And I'm going to let my player use this one. And I might not do it the same way, but maybe I'm just going to do this. And say to my player, hey, you know what? This is your time to contribute to the, and I'm going to outline it in black because, you know, that's part of the flair of comic books. I'm going to go there. I'm going to draw a shape, and I'm going to change that to black. And you could, if you wanted to, ahead of time, just go and actually, my cat is here. Hello, Sabine. She is a brand new kitten and member of my family, but she's a troublemaker. So you could go ahead and Photoshop and ahead of time actually just make these boxes and import them into Roll20. I should have done that, but I did not. So this kind of takes more time if you do it this way. But here you go. Just put a nice little black outline around it. And say to your players, go up to the text box and do what I just did here with Nick Fury, and give them that opportunity to add in a sort of a comic book flair to it. Further to that, as you're playing the game, again, you could be running your combat on a separate page with a separate grid, if you prefer grid-based combat, things like that, or if you just do theater of the mind. Just use this page as your sort of, like I said, living comic book. Now let's just say you have a villain that comes into play, and you want to integrate that villain into the living comic book concept. Well, it's very simple. We can do that. Let's, in this case, throw in a Hydra agent. Not getting too complicated here. Sorry. And our Hydra agent has now come into the scene. So if we wanted to, we could add another text box in. And depending on your narrative and what's happening in your narrative, we could do something like this. We could say underneath. Oh, I'm going to actually change that because I accidentally forgot to change the color of it. Let's go here. Objects and tokens. I may have put that on a different layer. Let's try here. No, it should be on the objects and tokens layer. Maybe undo that. There we go. Okay. So I could go in and add some Hydra dialogue style text box with my black. And again, black just sort of being the common one, but let's just do a Hydra one right here for the players. Go back and click on that. Let's move the Hydra to the front so it overlaps the text box. And let's put some Hydra dialogue in there. And again, this takes time, so if you premeditate a lot of this stuff, it's going to be easier than just simply doing it on the fly. Got that, it's good. And this is just really cheesy comic book titling, but there we go. Now, you could continue to layer into this, and your creativity is going to vary. You know, if you want to start adding in different dynamics and different effects and stuff like that, feel free. So, for example, you might have, you know, in your scenario, a crowd of people. I think I've loaded in some graphics already from previous games. Let's just have a look. Let's just see. And again, you would basically comb through based on what you think's happening in your game, and maybe you could add in elements that are gonna, you know, draw graphics from Google or whatever, that draw in elements that you know are gonna play into your game. In this case, let's just throw in some comic book panel here that I actually curated already. And if I wanted to give that a little bit more attention, I could go down here. You could even go in and create comic book talk bubbles, for that matter, in Photoshop to help your players out if you wanted to. So let's go down here and add in a scene with some police. Let's just say that in your adventure, the heroes are going to be meeting up with the police officers, and part of that encounter is having some dialogue and stuff. So back to whole drawing a shape thing again. I'm going to make this a black border, and I'm going to go around. And I'm going to say into our living comic book, I'm going to add in some dialogue. Okay, and I'm going to add in something right here. What's up? And I'll change that. There we go. So maybe there's an element of police coming into the to the scene, and you are role playing that, right? Like you're having a role play. You're not limiting your role play to this graphic. Living comic, but you're role playing that, but you want to refer your players back to maybe a visual cue, and sort of throwing that in there gives them a chance to sort of feel like, hey, I'm really a part of this. Another thing, and I think I've got some good old-fashioned art assets kicking around. Maybe, yeah, here we go. So here's something that I whipped up in Photoshop as well. It wouldn't be a comic book if it didn't have your good old-fashioned blast symbol. Or a blast icon, and there you go. So some other visual elements that I've pulled from comic books to add to the flair. Give you another example here. Rather than just having the red panels, you could also have yellow. So maybe you want to, in your living comic book, you want to actually have a prelude rather than the police just showing up. You can just do a little box here, and then you can and again, I really think you probably should be doing what I said, is actually going and creating these assets with the black already around it, rather than having to go and do that each time. But you could go in here, and you could go and put a piece of text in there, and you could say the helps if I have command over the keyboard. The police arrive. ... Make sure you're going back to your selection tool, because otherwise you're going to start laying assets down. And there you go. So we've added, and I'll zoom out a bit so you can see the global living comic. And you can see it's now starting to take place, or take shape, sorry. You know, and as more villains and more heroes come into the scene, you don't all have to have them the exact same size. Let's just say Cyclops arrives in the Blackbird and decides to help out our hero. You know, throw his token on there. And with comic books, you know, you're kind of creating your own style, you know, whether you want to adhere to the traditional line by line grid. I mean, heck, if you wanted to, you could even go into Photoshop and create your comic book template with the appropriate squares where you're putting stuff in, like dialogue and characters and stuff. That way it's a little bit more structured. Or you could just go ad hoc like I'm doing here and channeling my inner Rob Liefeld and you know, Todd McFarlane and Jim Lee of the 90s, where the comic book page is just a splash page of imagery and all sorts of crazy stuff. But you know, it's a living comic, so if you want to do that in Photoshop, you could also hit me up and leave some comments and inquiry, or email me at maverickgameslss@gmail.com, and I can tell you how I make these things in Photoshop, these assets. But let's just say Cyclops came in, and heaven forbid, let's just say that we had a villain show up. So maybe let's throw in this guy here, one of my favorite villains of all time. I'm still trying to get a handle on how to use him in figuring out how to use him in Marvel Multiverse. He's not as powerful as I thought he was in Marvel Multiverse, so I got to figure out how to use him. But say Taskmaster shows up, right? And then say, you know, we want to give him a different dialogue color, so we just go in here, and I have a blue one prepped, the good old-fashioned blue box. So let's just go here, and I think this one's pre-formatted with the black lines. It is, right? And I can just go like this, send this one to the back. There we go. Add in some more dialogue, and so on as the game evolves. So that's just a little brief sort of snapshot of what I'm planning on doing with my Marvel Multiverse RPG sessions. I definitely think pre-planning some of this would be a good idea, uploading graphic assets that you can drop onto the table on the fly, rather than constantly resizing and drawing from the Roll20 toolset. It wasn't really designed for this, so having some of those prepared ahead of time, and experimenting with the dialogue fonts as well. That's a very comic book thing to do. And also highly recommend pulling art assets from the internet and saving them in your folder so that you can slap those on things like police officers, buildings getting blown up. Even if they are playing pre-gens, for example, it's always a good idea. So for example, I don't know if I have one here. Let's try this. So I had a session where I was running with Spider-Man, and I'm not sure if I have it here, maybe not. Let's try this one. So say you're running something with the Hulk, for example, and you have an asset that's pre-established from Marvel canon, obviously, that involves the Hulk. Well, here you go. The Hulk shows up and makes a mess of everything, and you can have that integrated. So a comic book panel that's commonly available on the web, you might want to pull that to add some flair, and it's a simple matter of just dragging that in, giving it a good old black border like I have been doing. And even if the Hulk is in the scene, you can go like this, and you can pull Hulk in and go, you know what? Hulk makes an appearance. And we put him there. That's part of that whole pre-planning thing. Zoom in. Yeah. Not the best comic book panel in the world, but there you go. You get the idea that you can actually pull graphic assets from all the years of Marvel Comics and integrate that into your living comic book page to add some dynamic elements. As far as combat goes, I have two minds about it. Really, I had toyed with actually using a traditional grid. Let's see if I got one set up here. Yeah, so I had toyed with using a traditional grid for combat, and I think maybe that's okay too. You can use the two in combination. You can have the living comic book and then zoom into an actual battle grid. You know, and if you wanted to incorporate both, so for example, say you wanted to actually have your battle grid, but you also wanted elements of the living comic, well, you could incorporate that right onto your battle mat. So say the hand ninjas show up, and you want to highlight that with your players and create sort of a living comic right there. Just go like this, and drag a word box in. give it some dialogue. I'll go here and say, and then we just go back to our selection, bring it up, and then put a border on it. You're probably going to get quicker at doing this sort of thing. And there you go. So you can actually use the traditional tabletop format for battles using grid, because Marvel, the Multiverse RPG does actually have a measurement system, and it's called spaces, and each space is a 5 foot, just like Dungeons and Dragons. So if you have players who want a little bit more of a specific grid style combat while you're playing, not doing role-playing scenes, and you can zoom into something like this, and then you can also incorporate the living comic book style stuff. So there's lots of flexibility, but I think it's worth noting that this game, more so than any other role-playing game I've ever played, really does merit a step back in how you deliver these exciting stories to your players. So yeah, hope you all enjoyed that. It wasn't really a long stream. I just wanted to get this out of my head because it's been brewing in me for a while. And keep on the lookout. This will end up on YouTube, so enjoy on YouTube. Thanks for watching the stream if you watched it. And subscribe if you can, because hopefully we'll have some more content like this coming up. So everybody take care, and we'll talk to you soon.